Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Today's show is called The Climate Panic Crew and the Useful Pawns of China. Now, if you ask me what the show is going to be about, I don't really know. This is the title I was given by my guest today on the show, and this is what he's going to be talking about. So I'm going to have a lot of questions, as you may have as well. It's a live show, by the way, if you're listening on Sunday between 4 to 5 p.m. Holy Time right here in the land of Israel, or if it's between 9 to 10 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time, that means that we are live this Sunday morning, and you can call into the show with your own questions. We love listening, getting calls from our listeners and hearing your questions that you have for a guest, etc. So please call in if you have any questions. Our numbers are on the top of our homepage at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And I want to say hello to all of our listeners from all over the world listening in, from all over the United States and Canada, Israel, Mexico, Argentina, France, New Zealand. Here's another one, France Metropolitan. What's that? Okay. I didn't know it was different than France, but the UK, there's more here, South Africa, China, Hungary, Iran. That's pretty cool. And other places as well. I only have another minute left here, so I want to skip on now here to some other announcements here. If you've been paying attention, as of last week, we had our debut shows of two new shows that we have on Israel News Talk Radio. One is called The Definitive Wrap, and that is a hard-hitting political show where they interview people, government people, heads of corporations, etc., that are somehow in the news. They did Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They've done things on the Israeli-Arab conflict and the Abraham Accords. Where is that going? Our relations with the Arabs. And another show that's quite humorous, I'm happy to say, and it's called Lighten Up. And it's with two former stand-up comedians who basically take the news stories of the week and they give it to you, but in a humorous way. And that airs every Monday, and the Definitive Wrap every Wednesday. Check our schedule, our broadcast schedule, on our homepage at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. There's a tab there for broadcast schedule.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to remind you that if you have any comments or questions that you want to give on the show on the topic that we're talking about, our numbers are on the top of our homepage at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You can also join us in the chat room. If you press that red button on our homepage that says Listen Now, it will take you into our chat room. Just sign in with your Facebook or your Twitter, or you can sign in. There's another way to sign in as well. You can join us in the room. Hi to everybody who's in the chat room right now. We're going to be talking today about the Climate Panic Crew and the useful pawns of China. I have no idea really where this show is going to take us. My guest obviously does. This is the title that he pretty much gave to me that we're going to talk about today. So we're all on this journey together. Let's see where this ship takes us. Our guest is Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. He's a researcher, former lecturer at Ben-Gurion University, and has authored over 80 books and 400 research papers on science, history, and more. He commentates on Mideast and world issues. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem.
Thank you.
All right, so where do we start?
Well, let me just preface everything by informing people that don't know me that this is actually my primary area of research for the past many decades. So I think I'm qualified to speak about this subject. Let's begin with some definitions, okay?
Yes.
The United Nations body is called the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the first question, obviously, is climate changing? Are we experiencing a climate change? And the answer to that is, of course we are. Climate constantly changes. It always has, and it probably always will. Climate changes. That's what climate does. Anybody who denies the concept that climate changes has no concept whatsoever of what climate is or what science is. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the question is, well, is the planet warming? Well, that's a sort of a nonsensical question, because when you say, is it warming, from when to when? Is it warming in the last 2 years? Is it warming in the last decade? Is it warming in the last century? Is it warming in the last millennium? Warming from when to when? Warming means from one temperature, average temperature, to a different average temperature. So is it warming over the last 150 years? Again, the answer is yes, of course it is. In 1850, the world exited from what was called the Little Ice Age. So if it was not warming, we'd be in trouble. So yes, the climate is warming. The planet is warming. Is there any reason for alarm? Absolutely none whatsoever. Total nonsense.
Let me jump in here for a moment, because I've, my job is to see what's going on, right? And I might see things that I agree with, and I might see things that I don't agree with, and I might see things that I know nothing about it. And one of them is that some people are claiming that the axis of the Earth is tilting a bit, and that is what's changing the weather. And I have actually, I'm not into this whole climate change thing that Al Gore is, proposing or trying to push. However, and counting that out completely, I have seen that in Israel, the weather is different today than it used to be when I first came here, maybe 40 years ago. Is it that long? So I'm thinking that, have you not noticed that it starts to rain more in May and June? Like once or twice it's rained, whereas before it never did in those months. We had our winter rains and that was it. And sometimes we get these like freak, even if it's just a drizzle, we never would get those things before. Any comment?
Okay, yeah. The personal answer is that in we are living in what is called the Mediterranean climate. There are different climate types around the world. Pardon me. In this climate, what has happened over the last few decades is that the rainy season has moved slightly by a few weeks to be a little bit later. So in other words, it starts a little bit later and it ends a little bit later. Is it less long? No. Is it? Are we getting less rainfall than in the past? Statistically, we are not. We are getting this again, approximately the same amount. Of course, it fluctuates from year to year. That's the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what over the last few years, the last, say, decade. You can look at weather. When you talk about climate, you don't usually talk about anything less than a century. That's the sort of minimal level of perception for climate. So you are right. Your observation is correct, but it is ending later and it is beginning later. But it doesn't really change anything. Okay. The amount of rainfall is approximately the same.
Except right now in other parts of the world we're seeing crazy floods.
Sorry?
I'm saying except in other parts of the world right now we're seeing crazy freak floods that haven't been, so damaging and so much in the amount as, for maybe 100 years or so. So that's interesting.
That's actually correct. If we actually look at the statistics, we are actually seeing fewer tropical storms and fewer hurricanes than we were in the middle of the previous century.
Okay.
Remember, there's always a question of perception. Perception in our day and age is controlled by the media. So we need to understand what's going on here. Is the planet warmer? Yes. Is there more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Yes. Is carbon dioxide a pollutant? Absolutely not. Total nonsense. An absolutely ridiculous idea to say that carbon dioxide is pollution. Absolutely, totally ridiculous. Without a reasonable level of carbon dioxide, there is no life on the planet. Carbon dioxide makes up something about 0.3% of the atmosphere. It's a very small amount. There's a lot more water vapor, and water vapor is a much stronger greenhouse gas than is carbon dioxide. If we look at the historical record over the last million years, every time climate warmed, there was an increase in carbon dioxide, not the other way around. In other words, carbon dioxide does not cause the climate to warm. Carbon dioxide is a result of a warming climate. Now, what does this climate? What does this change in carbon dioxide mean? Well, for one thing, it means that for the first time in 2,000 years, approximately, the people in the Sahel, the belt of a land immediately south of the Sahara Desert, are going to have enough food to eat. Now, of course, the Europeans don't like that. They must prefer the Africans to be starving independent. But lo and behold, what can you do? The Africans are actually going to have enough food to eat. Isn't that a terrible thing?
Okay.
So that's the result. That's the direct result of an increase in carbon dioxide. There's actually greater plant growth. And if you look at satellite photographs, you can actually see over the last several decades an increase in the total amount of greenery on the planet.
Keep going.
Now, there's another issue that everybody in the imitation media likes to talk about a lot, is the rise in sea levels. I just happened a few weeks ago that I visited a place called Apollonia, which was a port in during the time of the Romans. For instance, it was a port on the coastline. Pardon me. It was a port between Jaffa and Akko. It was the main port between them. Remember, at that time, ships didn't go out to the sea; they would hug the coast, and they would go into the coast, into a port every night to bed down there. So Apollonia was a port. Well, if you look at it today, the depth of the water for hundreds of meters out is no more than 10 or 20 centimeters. So how could it have been a port? The answer is that 1,000 years ago, the level of sea level was much, much higher than it is today. Much higher. So is the danger of sea level rising? Not really. Has sea level risen over the last 100 years? Not even by 1 millimeter around the world. And there are 10 countries in the world that were sea level to rise by any significant amount, meaning single-digit millimeters, they would begin to disappear, like Micronesia and other places like that. No country like that has disappeared. Every time one of those countries has been egged on to issue a lawsuit against somebody or other for the idea that they are going to be washed out of their homes, they've lost the lawsuits because nobody has been able to prove that there's been any rise in sea level, not any significant rise, any rise whatsoever over the last 150 years.
So how does this affect us? Why should we care?
Well, it affects everybody because everybody today around the planet is listening to stupid little girls like this jerk from Sweden. People are dying. Yeah, well, people are dying, but not from climate change. People are dying because there are imperialistic people around the world that are trying to kill them. That's why people are dying. It has nothing whatsoever to do with climate change. So climate change is being used as an excuse to drive a tremendous revolutionary change in the economics of the world.
Okay, stop there.
That is the point of it.
Okay, so you could go more into that when we get back. We have to take a break. Don't go anywhere, everybody.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we are talking with Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. He is talking to us about, actually it got more interesting during the break, because after he's going to be talking about, I just lost, the climate change and the panic crew that they have trying to get us all excited and scared. He's going to be talking about, is Israel 12 weeks away from a war with Iran? So maybe I'll change the title of the show when I put it up for podcast. We'll see. In any case, you were saying in the last segment, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem, that this is going to change the economics, this whole push and agenda of the trying to tell us that there's, climate change and it's going to destroy us if we keep doing what we're doing. So take it from there.
Well, I would never phrase it that way. I would never say this is going to.
Okay.
I would say that this is what they're attempting to do.
Thank you. Fine. I'm good with that.
There's a group of people that is generally identified with the city of Davos in Switzerland, where there's a yearly conference of the super rich people and the people who consider themselves to be super powerful. Little guys like Bill Gates and et cetera, et cetera.
Right, little guys, yeah.
And they've come out with anybody who's not familiar with what it is I'm talking about. You should definitely look up the on either YouTube or the news channels, whatever you're accustomed to, the concept of the Great Reset. This is something that's become very, very significant, very important. Everyone should be very aware of this idea. The idea is, okay, as a result of COVID, we have learned, we meaning the so-called elites, we have learned new methods of controlling people. And we now want to implement these new methods for the purposes of the Great Reset, which means let's rebuild back better. That's one of the catchphrases that they use.
Yeah.
But the catchphrase that I'm more fond in double quotation marks, is you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yes.
That is actually what they are printing.
Yeah.
You will own nothing and you will be happy.
Okay, so stop for a moment, because I want to say that I've been watching this new thing going on in the United States. I don't remember if it's a certain state or if it's federal, but they have where that you cannot evict renters of your properties that haven't paid for maybe a year because of COVID. And we understand why. I'm not being one-sided about this, that they don't have to, they cannot be kicked out of the houses. However, at the same time, the banks are not lightening up on the property owners, the landlords who own the property and have to pay a mortgage every month at the bank. So here we see that these people could lose their property. And then everything is, slowly, people are being relieved of their property, relieved of their parnasa or their how they can make a living. And soon they'll all have to depend, perhaps, on the federal government if this keeps going this way. People who are renters don't have, so they're already the prime people that the government can manipulate. If you want to have a roof over your head, then, get with the program. And with the landlords, they'll lose what they have and maybe go bankrupt, who knows, or at least lose the property. And this is one of the things that was special about America, that you could be a property owner. You didn't have that in Europe with all of the barons and the upper class. There were the serfs and there was the upper class, basically, and people who wanted to be the masters of their own destiny, to go out and own property. They went to the New World. They went to America. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, factually, you're absolutely correct. First of all. Okay? Now, this is a federal mandate. It was mandated by some university professor who was appointed by Biden to be the head of the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. She came out with this a couple of days ago, extending the mandate that to prohibit evictions, and even Biden, the super intelligent leader of the free world, came out and admitted openly that this is absolutely unconstitutional. He's aware of it, and he couldn't care less.
Okay. Do you want to pause for a moment and take a caller?
Sure.
Okay, we have Antonio joining us from the settlement of Washington, D.C. Hi there, Antonio. What's your question or comment for our guest?
Question for you. Okay. The pollution is all this situation going on with pollution and what to say about climate change and all that stuff. My take to it is like they should think about it. Cows are dangerous to mankind. Cow has been around from the beginning of time with the red heifer and so forth, and so how can cow pass gas be dangerous to mankind? Another thing is that there's more people in this world than cows that pass gases. Number one, for climate control. Number two is this silly notion saying that that we all have to be thinking together and working together as one. Yes, we all are responsible for each other. But make sense out of nonsense. People need to recognize these antics they're playing. If you read about Stalin and the chicken, how he fled the chicken and the chicken fell, following him and so forth and all this stuff, they're doing the same thing as today. And that's what I'm pretty sure my statement.
All right. Antonio, thank you for your call. Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem, do you want to reply to Antonio?
First of all, Antonio, thank you for calling. Thank you for coming back. It's nice to hear a familiar voice. You're absolutely, again, factually, you're absolutely correct. There's no doubt that what you're saying is true facts. Pardon me the explicitness, but cows fart, and so do humans. You're absolutely right.
And my technician is telling me that there's more cows in the world than humans, but go ahead.
No, that's not actually right. I actually have a population count of cows, sheep, and pigs, and chickens, and I can give it to you if you like, but that's
okay.
Sort of irrelevant right now.
I'll give it to him. Go ahead.
But there are a lot of cows, a lot of chickens, a lot of pigs, a lot of sheep, a lot of goats. Yeah, there are a lot of them, many billions. But there are billions of humans, and one of the points of this whole process is to make the population of the world smaller. They do not want you to be alive, Antonio, or me, or Tamar, or any of the rest of us.
Okay,
they have conditions. They have people that they prefer and people that they do not prefer.
Okay, so explain that a little bit in a little bit more detail for people like me who, I can live my life. I don't care that there are a lot of people on the earth right now. God's in control. He's taking care. We're all his children. He'll make sure that everything. Well, that's what I believe. In other words, it doesn't bother me that other people are alive. What bothers them so much about this? That they want to destroy people.
Their way of thinking is that if they control everything, then they can control also the quantity of population. Why not? The whole point of everything is to control everything.
So with
That
all
is
their billions
desire.
of dollars, they're still not happy. They're still not satisfied.
Correct. Because the object is not. You have to understand the basic difference, the basic concept, the philosophical concept behind all of Marxism. Marxism is not based upon accrual of wealth for wealth's sake. It's based upon accrual of power for power's sake. That's what Marxism is. Now, if capitalism, if the idea of capital is a method of power, then Marxism can use capital as part of their power structure. That is exactly what Deng Xiaoping announced when he changed the Chinese Communist Party from Maoism to the limited capitalism that they now have, or I should say, had until a few years ago in communist China. The idea was to leverage capital without capitalism, and therefore you accrue more power for the socialists. But the objective is power. The objective is not something else. And when there are a lot of people, it's more difficult to control. You want to control everyone. You need to have the power to control them.
I just want to say here, my technician checked up online, and he said that you are indeed correct, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. There are more people than cows. Go ahead. Just wanted to make that clear for our audience.
Numbers because I have a database with the animal husbandry populations of the planet.
So listen, we only have 60 more seconds for this topic, because then we're going to go on to a possible war with Iran in 12 weeks. How do you want to end this segment?
Well, I don't think this is a segment that can actually be ended. This is I want to encourage people to look up the idea or the phrase, the Great Reset. People need to know what this is, need to be aware of what it is that they are talking about. This is a significant danger. People know me. I'm not a crisis monger. I don't promote crisis. I don't promote negativism. But people need to be aware of what these people are talking about and what it means to them in the short term.
All right. Well, we have to hold it right there. We're going to be back, and we're going to be talking about, will Israel be in a war with Iran in 12 weeks from now? That's fascinating. I have not heard that one before. We'll be right back.
And we're off? Oh, no, we're not.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. If you've been paying attention to the news, you know that Israel was under fire, rocket fire, from Lebanon and this last week, and the Hezbollah is acting up. The Hezbollah, by the way, is a proxy of Iran. Iran is getting close to getting the nuclear weaponry, and so the question is Israel 12 weeks away from a war with Iran? Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem.
Well, towards the end of last week, Benny Gantz, the Minister of Defense of Israel, announced that the Ministry of Defense has concluded from intelligence reports that Iran is 10 weeks away from what's called breakout. Breakout means that they have sufficient highly enriched uranium to create a single bomb. Now, that's a difficult concept, and we don't have time to really go into it in any detail right now. But let's say that there are various levels of bombs that one can have. One can have a bomb which simply explodes and distributes poisonous materials, like a bomb that would explode with poison gas, for instance. But you can do that instead of with poison gas, with radioactive material, and that's called a dirty bomb. And the next level up from that is an atomic bomb, similar to what the United States dropped on Hiroshima at the end of World War II, and Nagasaki. So when they're talking about breakout, they're talking about a quantity of material. They're not talking about necessarily the technology to actually build and deliver an atomic weapon. But it's a very major step which allows them to be much, much closer to that second capability of delivering an atomic weapon. Now, Israel has declared many times, as have many other countries, the United States and European countries, that Iran will not be allowed to have an atomic bomb. Clearly, we have as much faith in the declarations of the United States and Europe as we have in the declarations of my toilet bowl. And Israel will defend itself by itself, as it always has, because we know from bitter experience over many centuries that we can never, never, never trust anything that any Christian says in terms of defending the integrity and health and well-being of Jews. Never. So if Iran is 10 weeks away from being able to create a bomb or having enough material to create a bomb, and it's not clear from the announcement how far away between quantity of material and the actual creation of a bomb they are, because we just don't, that hasn't been announced. It is very likely that the election in double quotation marks, of this horrible monster that calls himself Raisi as the president of Iran, a person responsible for the murder of more than 3,000 Iranians, not exactly a kind of person that any human being would want to have as the head of government. And the tremendous increase in Iranian piracy throughout the Persian Gulf area, clearly things are heating up quickly and precipitously. And we all need to be aware of this. This has ramifications for the entire world. Remember, 40% of all world oil travels through the Straits of Hormuz. And another significant percent travels through the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb. So if there is a war, an active shooting war with Iran, many countries in Europe and in Eastern Asia will be in big, big trouble in terms of their economies and possibilities of economic collapse. I'm talking about something which is extreme. If China, for instance, receives 80% of its energy imports from the Persian Gulf, 80%. If the Chinese economy collapses, there's no pharmaceuticals in the world. If the Chinese economy collapses, there are no plastics in the world.
So I want to ask you, if an attack has to be made against Iran, and again, I want to specify, this doesn't necessarily mean the people of Iran, but maybe their facilities, etc., which has been, slowly being done anyway by somebody. I don't know if Israel is taking credit for any of this, and if they have done it. But how would that affect the Israeli government? Because today, with this new government, we have Arabs in the coalition, and they probably would not stand for it, and they would leave if Bennett made or gave the okay for any attack on Iranian holdings or anything like that, or capabilities. How would that work out?
It's a very good question. Clearly, there's no clear answer to that. Legally, if the government was to be collapsed by, for instance, the a no confidence motion in the Knesset because of the Arabs that are supporting it, the government doesn't go away. I mean, the war can still be prosecuted exactly as it has been or as it would be, even without the support of the Arabs, because there's a minimal 3-month cycle by law between when a government collapses and the time when elections can be carried out. A minimum of 3 months. So no war is going to last for 3 months. So your question is a good question, but there's no definitive answer other than to say that it would not affect the war. It could affect other things. Other things besides the war. For instance, they're attempting to pass a budget, and clearly they would not be able to do that.
Okay, so in the last the last 3 minutes that we have on the show, what do you want to leave us with?
Well, the attack by Iran on this tanker, pardon me. We need to understand how things work today. This tanker that was attacked was or is Liberian flagged, owned by a Japanese company, managed by a British company, and the owner of this British company is an expat Israeli who lives in Monaco. Okay? And the ostensible reason why Iran attacked it was because it was managed by this Israeli, which is probably about the most stupid reason one can possibly come up with. Now, they murdered there a British subject and a Romanian subject. The British have made noises that they're not pleased with that, but nobody believes the Brits anymore. I mean, they have a navy which is as useful as a screen door in a submarine. And the British, we all saw how the British reacted when Iran captured one of their ships, and they did nothing.
So all bark and no bite, okay?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the United States is more or less in the same situation right now. Iranians captured an American naval vessel. With the British, it was at least a civilian vessel. But with the United States, it was a naval vessel, held the sailors at gunpoint, and America did nothing. So, as I said, no Israeli is going to express any degree of confidence that any of these Christian countries will come to our aid. What is probably going to happen, and I say this guardedly, is that there will be some sort of attack by Israel to certain kinds of facilities in Iran with the attempt to very quickly paralyze the Iranian economy in such a manner that it will damage the economy, their military capacity, without harming terribly the Iranian citizenship. The last thing that we would want is to create a situation where the Iranians would suddenly back their government, which they despise totally today.
Right.
And the options for us being able to attack them militarily are many. We can attack them from by cruise missiles from the sea. We can attack them by airplanes from Israel. We can attack them by airplanes from other places, which I will not name at the moment. And we can attack them by missiles. They have only the options of attacking by missiles and or attacking by missiles from Iran and Lebanon and Gaza at the same time. Lebanon and Gaza are not significant dangers to us in terms of existentialism. They're annoyances, but not much more than that.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for being with us here on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem.
I wish I had more cheerful things to say.
We have a few more seconds back. Okay. So I thought I read the time wrong. Maybe I need glasses. Okay. All right. So in the last, we have 10 seconds. Last
10
word.
seconds?
Yeah.
Well, people, all I can say in 10 seconds is that the world is really a nice place if we wouldn't screw it up so much.
Amen. That's good. That's good for me. Yes, that's good to go on. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. The world is a good place. Let's try to always make it friendly and loving and be good to each other. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.